I think it
Did
is.
I take a picture?
No, it's okay.
Hello, Joy. I'm Allie Hall. I'm Josie Lucas.
Jessica Mackey.
Lucas Frazier.
Mariah Rago.
Cool.
Cool. Okay, there we are. We're all here. So, I'm group leader this week. So, one thing that we all read a lot about and wrote all about was comprehensible input. Does everybody recognize that term?
Yes.
Yes. And I wanted to talk about more about what comprehensible input is and what that looks like in a classroom. Because honestly, I was a little confused. So, just because it seems like such a big thing. So I was wondering if we could like break it down a little bit, maybe.
I guess what I got from it is like to get comprehensible input, you need to be like you shouldn't have any like distractions, I guess, whether it's anxiety or motivation or something else.
What was it? It was confidence.
Self-confidence.
Yeah,
Self-esteem.
You're supposed to have like low anxiety, high self-esteem, high motivation.
Yeah, but how do you enact that in a classroom?
I think that's just like kind of what we have been like learning up to this is like incorporating like their culture and like making them comfortable in the classroom and making sure they see themselves in the curriculum. And I don't know, like what I kind of got is like the classroom is where you kind of set this foundation, and then like where you really learn is like in outside interactions, and that's where you get the most valuable comprehensive input.
Yeah, the classroom has to lay the foundation so that when you go out, you're not just like totally overwhelmed.
Yeah.
You need like some foundation like that. Yeah, I think it does have to do with the like especially low anxiety. It has to do with like your classroom climate too, and just like the sort of environment that you set up in your classroom. Like I remember Lucas, you said in your post something about like taking breaks throughout the day and letting kids walk around, that kind of thing, because it can be really overwhelming to just have like, you know, an hour of grammar or something like that is too much for them. So
Right.
having the right environment.
I thought like getting up at times could be a way to help alleviate all this kind of monotony that ends up like all taking place, and because like just sitting in the classroom and like sometimes it's so easy for us to get in our own heads, and I feel like, you know, as a teacher, it's only one can do to make it so that this classroom does you know, learn in a more learning acquisitable manner is to again like take things slow and be understanding as a teacher, and to create an environment that's welcoming. But then again, the only way one can be welcoming in this environment, or not the only way, but one way I think, is just by, you know, like even speaking like calmly. I think as a teacher at times, and understanding like when the energy requires for a more kind of calming manner to take place, or for a more more like boom, demanding kind of thing to take place. You know, it all depends on the energy of the classroom or whatever.
So, comprehensible input is just an environment that you create?
I don't think that's all.
That's what what's the other side of it?
So my understanding is that comprehensible input is the information that is presented to students that they can understand. So it's the input of information going into the child's minds that they can then translate or whatever in their mind into something that they can understand. But then Krashen also explained how comprehensible input isn't just input that's at the level that they're at right then. It's the input plus one.
Yeah.
So it's whatever you're saying when it comes to language. It's whatever your structure of the sentence is. Like it has maybe a few words that they don't know that pushes them just beyond their comfort level with language, because they still need to learn. It's that kind of what is it, the ZPD?
So Vygotsky development.
Yeah, that Vygotsky talked about.
Yeah, I liked how I'm looking at your post and you said it's slightly beyond their current language ability. So the idea of like giving them something that they're not just stagnant, it's not stuff that they already know, but it's not so far along that they just have no idea what you're talking about. So it's kind of that zone in between of presenting material that is beyond their current level, but that they can learn with the scaffolding from the teacher.
That's kind of what I understand comprehensible input is.
Yeah.
But I think it is the content, not just
Yeah.
the classroom environment. It's talking also about the actual content itself.
I think it's so easy for me to kind of get lost in what I'm saying, as in like to understand like the teaching environment that I'll be teaching or whatever or I could be teaching in the future, and for me to understand that like there's also a more one could say also the more like personified example of being true to the classroom. I feel like that's one thing that's like difficult for me to fully understand is because I don't exactly know what my classroom will be like in the future, and I can't necessarily make like any expectations of what that classroom is going to be like and say that like that they're going to be like, oh, they're going to be like this and they're going to be like that, but I can't necessarily expect any kind of expectations from my classroom, and that's one thing that I'm gonna go in there with a free mind, free set, and it's like if things go good, then that's great. If things don't, then that's okay too. And I guess like my first year is going to be difficult too learning. Someone said something about ZPD. Is that zone proximal development? Yeah. So again, that's something that's like that will take time, and us as future teachers is something that I think we can all relate to. It's like it's time development.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point. Like we can't predict what our classroom is going to be like because we have to like make it specific to the needs of the students. And know your students yet. We haven't talked about that yet. So we can say like what the input hypothesis is and what's some of the MADA, we were just talking about
comprehensible input.
The comprehensible I was like the C word. Comprehensible input, like we can talk about what that will look like, but we don't know exactly what curriculum that's going to need for us students because it's going to be specific to them. So yeah, we can't say exactly what it's going to look like yet.
And I don't know, like I like social distance, so that plays a role in comprehensive input. I'm not sure. Like
you said distance or dissonance? Distance. Okay.
Social distance, right? Did you guys read that?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's like for a classroom, like or for people to like learn or be socialized, like you can't have this like distance, like they have to find similarities within the second language they're trying to learn, or like it has to be open minded, and it was like there's a lot that plays into like the role I think of comprehensive input. So, like you said, like I don't really know exactly how we would, like you said, achieve it.
Yeah.
But like I feel like you figure it out along the way, depending on the classroom.
Right, and it's like we don't know what our classroom is going to be like in the future. My classroom could be like 16 kids, could be 27 kids, could be being like 48 kids or something like that. I can't say for sure right now.
48 kids.
It would be fluttering. So I and it's like so if there's a classroom that was like that big, and there were some that like end up kind of imagining to a point where there will be all these kids that I'd have to manage. It'd be like that'd be a lot of kids for me. That'd be a lot of kids for me, and I can only settle on my own personal zone proximal development practically. You know, so the time of each individual student is gonna be difficult to understand. Having like imagining like 48 kids like in your classroom trying to like understand each one.
I don't know.
limit.
I don't
36.
is there a limit? I think there is a limit at like 35 or something because I remember being in a classroom with 32 kids.
Oh
and that was
That's
a lot.
So they have to like add portables and stuff.
Yeah.
At my elementary school, we started having to add portables because we were reaching like maximum capacity for the like student enrollment for each class. But I don't know if it was like a state thing or a school. I'm sure there's like a state law, but there might be like a school district policy on it too. What about output?
Can I actually, before we move on to output, I have a question about comprehensible input. So I am currently in a practicum where I'm working with third graders, and my particular group of third graders is reading, and we're doing like reading and writing unit right now. And the particular group that I'm with is reading below third grade level, so they're probably on the lower spectrum of the entire class. And as I was reading this comprehensible input and the definition, what Krashen was talking about, I kind of saw what I should be implementing within my lessons with these kids, because I think a lot of the times I think, ooh, I should dumb down my vocabulary for my students so that they understand what I'm talking about. But then he's talking about, no, like, put in those few vocabulary words that they won't know because they'll, like, pick it up. But I'm so afraid that they're not going to understand what I'm talking about when I use those vocabulary words. So how do I balance out using the comprehensible input, but also getting that understanding of what's going on between like all of my kids?
So you're saying like with the individual needs and still making sure like the classroom like stays in a learning, approachable kind of manner.
Yes. So using the big words, but still having a sense of understanding of what's going on. Because I think a lot of the times I've noticed that when I do lessons with them and I use big words, we're doing like inferences about characters and making summaries, and when I say inference, they just have like this blank look on their face, and I can't tell if that's because they don't understand what's going on or
captivation.
Well, you could even just like, if you notice like the blank look on their face, what if you just in that moment said the other word, the exact same sentence with the other word, like back to back?
Yeah.
Like
that's what I've been doing. Is like I like use the vocabulary word, give a definition, and then continue using the vocabulary word. But I always have like one or two kids who are like, I don't know what we're doing. So I think it's a hard balance between having that comprehensible input and then also like meeting the needs of the students.
It's also hard for students to speak up and say that they don't know like a word.
So they just like sit there and don't do anything. And it's like, okay.
I finally like got over in college. I just started asking. One of my professors always used like what she called like these $5 words, and I just raised my hand over and over again. What are you talking about? What do you mean? But that was in college. I would have never done that in elementary school.
There's too many teacher tactics out there. You know, like I feel like that a lot of us like we don't really know what they are, because I mean I'm no teacher yet. I can't say I have. So yeah. So like I feel like one teacher tactic though that people do implement is like it's like, okay, after a lesson people will like kind of the teacher will be like, okay, like class, we can close your eyes, and like everyone closes their eyes or whatever, and they'll be like, okay, now like raise your hand if you get it, you know, and then raise your hand if you know, keep your hand down if you don't. And I feel like that's one way to keep the input, comprehensible input at a nice even balance, because you don't have the pressure of, you know, your classmates looking at you and being like, oh, like, do they get it? Do they, you know, do they? And so like, you know, they kind of, you know, they understand that, in which case, you know, you understand as a teacher, like, okay, do I have to go over this lesson again? Or should I go over this lesson again? Could I go over this lesson again? And from there, you know, you understand.
Yeah. No, I remember times like in high school or middle school or even elementary maybe, I don't know. But where the teachers would be like, okay, does anybody like not understand it? And like even if I didn't understand it, I was like, I'm not gonna tell everybody that I don't understand this. You know what I mean? Like that's so embarrassing to be like, I don't get it. You know. So you're gonna be like, yeah, totally, I understand. So that I like that idea of having it be more anonymous. Like you're not looking at all the other kids to see if they get it, if you're the odd one out or whatever. Because usually there's gonna be more than just one kid that doesn't get it.
Right. It's kind of like you're just you as a teacher you kind of like end up like kind of swimming through and trying to find as to which kids get it and which kids don't. And like as a teacher, like our goal, I mean my goal at least as a teacher, I can't speak for everyone's behalf. My goal as a teacher is to bring enjoyment to the classroom in an approachable manner that is welcoming and is still comprehensive at the same time.
I think, Josie, going back to what you were saying too, I don't remember what the statistic is, but I remember hearing one time that students need, like when they're reading something, they need to understand, I want to say it was like 90% of the words in what they're reading to have genuine reading comprehension. So if they only understand 80% of the words, I'm making these stats up because I don't remember exactly what it is, but I think it was something like that. If they only understand 80%, then they won't really be able to get what the article or the paragraph is talking about or whatever. So I think that kind of plays into your question of like we can't just throw out all these fancy words and hope that students will just start to figure them out on their own, because then they're not actually going to comprehend anything. They get lost and they lose self-esteem because they don't think that they can understand it anymore. But I think there is that 10% where we should have some words that they don't understand, because if we don't, then how are they going to learn them if we don't introduce new words too?
This kind of reminds me of poetry for some reason. And like I'm not the best poetry reader, and so but I'm in all these classes right now. They're solely focused on analyzing like critical poetry. And
find that funny.
Really?
But for me, like one habit that I always got into was like, if I didn't understand a line, I didn't want to try to understand it. I just blocked it out. Like why am I learning this? This is dumb. This is stupid. It's not even legible. This is 300 years old. Like, what the heck? And it kind of reminds and that was just because I didn't understand a line. Like I read the poem and didn't understand it. And I just decided to just give up on it. So that kind of just reminds me of if you don't understand what someone is saying, you don't understand the word. I was faking it oh yeah, I totally, but I really didn't. But now I have new strategies. So.
Well, when I was in 3rd grade, I was below actually all around elementary, I was below my reading level, and they'd be like, go read books, go home and read books. But as a child, you don't want to go home and read books.
Yeah.
So there has to be another way to get students to want to read, or a fun way for them to, I don't know, because I was behind for so long because they'd say, go home and read more. Go home and read.
Did they do any other supporting methods or anything there?
Accountability for
That's
well, they would I had the same issue, but just kindergarten through 3rd grade, I was in reading resource and math resource, and
I switched school districts, and that one I was at reading level. This is also the one that just kind of through. But I was in the Portland school district, and then I moved to the Boise school district. So I was crossing state line, where the Portland reading level was I was at standard, but then I moved over to the Boise school district, and I was way below standard, which is why I kind of liked the Common Core, where their standards all the way across. But that's just another thing. But it's they would pull me out of class for a certain amount of time, and they would sit me down and have me do worksheets where you read a paragraph and then answer questions about it for comprehension, and then you do speed reading and all of that.
Yeah, I was out of class for a few hours doing workshops and different odd things.
Yeah, see,
but
I don't know if it's because my school is ghetto, but it's bad. Yeah, they would just say, go home and read books, you're way under the level. And I was like, my mom could try and make me read, like go in your room and read for 30 minutes.
My mom always did the same thing. She'd be like, you need to go in and read for 30 minutes. I'm like,
You need more outside help than that.
Yeah. I don't know how I compare to like state standards, but in my classroom in like 4th, 5th grade, I was one of the slower readers in class. I remember that. And I was always embarrassed to read out loud in class because I was like, I'm so slow. But I remember my teacher, how she did it is we had to read 20 minutes at home a night out loud to one of our parents. And we had to sign off the sheet and they had to sign off the sheet. And I remember that I remember not liking it sometimes, but like looking back, I remember reading The Hobbit to my dad, and that's like a really fond memory. And I remember coming to words and being like, Dad, what does that mean? And he would explain it to me and keep going or whatever. And so that was having the parent involvement there too. Like I enjoyed spending that time with my dad, but that takes a parent support that the teachers can't necessarily like.
Because not everyone
has that. And it worked well for us, but like I don't know if other kids in my class had the opportunity to do that. What if both your parents work, or what if you
don't speak the language?
Yeah.
So how would you, as an educator, find a solution for that? Because I'm like starting to think, okay, if I have a student who, if I've assigned this where you go home and read 20 minutes to a parent or an adult or anybody, like if I have a kid who maybe both his parents work, maybe he lives with like a single parent that works all the time, or maybe he lives in like a foster home that they just don't have time to do it. So then how would I as a teacher create a solution where the student can still get the 20 minutes reading aloud to somebody?
I think it was okay for me to read to my sisters too, actually, my older sisters. I don't remember for sure. I think my parents still had to sign off. So who knows? I mean, I can imagine 2 kids where they're like, yeah, mom, she read to me, and are totally like lying about it. But I like the idea of having some accountability, like having my parents involved in that. Then it's not just a teacher like, hey, go read, and there's no accountability. But I think it's a good point. Like we have to figure out how to make it work for students.
That should be my question.
I don't know.
How do you balance accountability?
Yeah.
And after school?
I feel like parents, they play such a big role in like the students' lives, and it's so hard for us as as future potentially learning teachers, for us to be able to influence other parents, because like I feel like there'll be a couple kids where we'll be like, we'll correct one thing one day with the student, but then like and that could be like a week ago, and like we could come back and it would be like it'd be like, oh, I thought I fixed this, but then like parents could end up making things that go wrong, and so like I could take that upon my own self to realize that like, man, like I made a mistake, like, or something like that. I'd be confused. I'd be like, what happened there? It's like, why is this kid like not reading fast? And that ends up like coming from I just be confused as a teacher, and so because there's a lot of psychology that we even just read about in the recent post that we did. Some posts, I think, sometimes it even mentioned like Chomsky, Piaget, and it was mentioned a few times about a couple theories. One was like developmental psychology, I think, that I went over. And the developmental psychology, it's very similar to ZPD. It's development. It's something that takes time, and the question was very vague though. I thought I was like kind of confused. I didn't really know a whole lot about the question, so I don't know.
Well, then you also have like the parents that disagree with what the teacher wants their child to do.
Well, yeah, and then you have the parents who support the child and allow them to struggle and then succeed, but then you also have the parents who the homework will go home and the homework will be done by the parents and then we'll come back. So it's like
my mom did my homework a few times.
Yeah. I remember
mostly just art projects.
Yeah, my parents were like, you're either gonna sink or swim, you better do it. So that I remember I worked in a Compass to campus, I think it was like a 7th grade English classroom a couple of years ago. And I remember we were sitting in the classroom and they were writing an essay. And it was like an hour and a half devoted to just writing the essay. And I'm like, why don't you just like have them take it home and do it? And she's like, I can't do that because there are a few students whom I won't name whose parents will sit down and write the entire essay for them. And I'm like, how on earth do you, again, this like goes back to the balance, like balancing accountability type of thing. Like if you send home homework, how do you know that it's the kid who's doing it? And then that brings up, do you send home homework? Or do you just
what is homework?
Yeah, what is homework?
What is homework?
So it's like, I don't know, that's one of the moral inner conflicts that I have about teaching is like, do you do homework? How much a parent like should be involved in? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with mine, it was mostly art projects because they'd rather just help me or sometimes do the art project than see the absolute. I don't know what it is about rulers and drawing lines that makes me just like start. I still to this day can't draw a line on a ruler without like. I think I
That's
don't
right
know.
in my alley. I'm such a straight line person.
I'm like,
Yeah.
So, they would, I remember one time in 3rd grade, my mom did like the whole project for me, an art project, where we had to like cut out like a piece of cardboard and decorate it as like a famous person.
Dang.
It was Celine Dion, you know. But my parents are willing to do that. Then it's like other parents are willing to do the exact same things too, like you would think. Only maybe with like essays or math or reading.
And some kids, they have like, like multilingual parents that take place. And I feel like that's even like kind of like a big task as a teacher to be able to kind of get the student to understand this English language that is, maybe could be the primary language in the classroom, but who knows in the future realistically? Because like I'm not trying to say like a whole lot about this. I'm just saying in the future though, because Josie, I don't know, you're part of this Spanish.
Yeah.
That's right. So like, so who knows it? Because like if Spanish is particularly expanding as a language, that could end up becoming a more popular language. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it is. I don't
I
know.
think it's becoming like more prevalent in school systems now, just because the population of the students in the school systems, that's going to be their cultural background, and like in the Arizona, I can't remember, like the ethnic classes that they had. Like I think we're going to see more and more incorporation of the cultures of the students. So it's kind of like that 41-minute PSYOP video that we were supposed to watch.
Yeah, I'd probably die just having to learn all this new material.
Well, and it's like they had half of the day was taught in English and then half of the day was taught in Spanish, so that they were getting the dual support between
at the same time, right?
Yeah. So that like the language that they're speaking at home, they're also learning how to read and write in that language, while they're also learning how to speak English, and then also read and write in English at the same time too.
I also have an idea that you were talking about is comprehensive or kind of. So like I'm taking this class right now, and I think something that's very useful in classrooms is like when you're learning something, you have initial ideas, and then like as you're going through, before you finish your final ideas, you have students come up and present like what helped them or how they would explain something rather than the teacher explaining it. So maybe the kids get what the kid is saying and maybe not getting what the teacher's saying. Like, do you know what I'm...
Yeah, we did that in a college classroom at Central where the teacher was like a guide, but we taught each other. So like everybody had like
Montessori.
Yeah, I'm not
kind of.
I don't know how Montessori.
Montessori is more like student-based learning rather than having a teacher teach, and it's just like it's more like circle time, group time, where students go and teach themselves.
But each lesson was like a theory. It was a theory class, language, literature, and theory, something like that. And language theory. Anyways, And so each, they were groups of 3, were in charge of doing like an hour-long lesson to the whole class on whatever their theory was. And there was like 30 theories that we had to be tested on, which was interesting.
And I think, what was I gonna say?
I don't know if it was good.
Going through when you're teaching something, like having the students like go in groups and talk about like what they think or what they learn, so they can bounce ideas off each other. Is something that is I think is very helpful. And,
that kind of ties into what you were bringing up with about output.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you can't just have all of this comprehensible input being thrown at you, especially with language. And I figured this out with all my Spanish classes, is that the classes that I did better in were the ones where I received comprehensible input and then could produce my own output. And it kind of also bounces. There's another one called interactiveness.
Yes.
By Van Leer, I think. The
Van
first one's about
Leer.
Swain.
Yeah. So no, it was Swain, wasn't it? Was Swain interactionist?
Swain is the
Swain is
output approach.
Okay,
And
so
Lear is the interactionist.
Yeah. So it's kind of like if students bring in that information, which is what you're talking about, where you're learning about the theory and then you're teaching it to the class, is that you're bringing it in and then you're putting it out again. So you're having to reach another level of comprehension in order to teach it to somebody else, thus ingraining it more in your mind.
mm-hmm.
So,
Can you explain to me a little bit the difference again between the output approach and the interactionist approach?
okay.
I was having a little bit of trouble.
So the interactionist approach is, actually, can I see it? It's very, very complicated. It's like almost a tiered thing. So output approach is when in a language class, the teacher will give you comprehensible input, but then the students need time to produce their own output. So this can either be in conversation, in peer-to-peer conversation is when you're having to produce some sort of
language.
Language. It can also go for like other subjects as well. And then interactionist, let's see, how does it go? Actually, no, I have my book in my backpack, and there's like a nifty little.
Yeah, it was better. Did you do interactionist too?
Yes. So interactionist is like, it kind of reminded me, if you give a mouse a cookie, he'll want some milk. And it's like one of those things. If he has some milk, then he's gonna like need something to mop up the milk with and all of that. And that's very much so what I was.
That's a book.
But yeah,
You give a mouse a cookie?
I've never
Oh,
heard of
If
that.
you give a moose a
favorite.
muffin, give a moose a muffin is my favorite.
If you give a pig a pancake, that's another.
He's gonna want some marmalade.
I've never heard of it.
Didn't read it.
Oh, you guys should look it up. It's such a good.
Sounds good.
Is it like a children's book?
Yeah, it's a picture book. Okay, so how it goes is that, according to this model, there's the little like 5.1 model up here.
Oh, yes. This took me like 20 minutes to go through.
It's such like a tiny paragraph too, and I'm like sitting there rereading it, and I'm like,
And I read the paragraph like 10 times, like, what does this have to do with this?
So the first here is that if learners are receptive during exposure to a new language, their attention will be focused. If the attention is focused, the language becomes input. If learners invest mental energy in the input, they will begin to comprehend it. So it's just like one step after another. It goes from exposure to input, input to intake, intake to uptake, uptake to proficiency. So it's all leading up to
Like a ladder.
proficiency. Yeah. So it's all becoming proficient in the language. So
What the thing that I was thinking about was when I think of is this interactionist, right?
yeah.
I think of like, oh, I'm going to interact with you so I can develop my own skills.
One is also having that like motivation to interact. You're not just like going through the steps of it because someone told you to. I'm like, I have the mental energy and the motivation to go through all of these steps to like go from exposure to input, input to intake, intake to uptake, and then finally reach proficiency.
Right, because the student has to be able to to want to learn. They can't just be exposed to it, which is acquisition. And in acquisition, obviously exposure will take place first, but then the learning ends up really occurring just from like their own drive and own motivation to be able to want to learn.
Well, it's like the affective filter thing, right?
Where
Like
that
you have to
wall
have
goes up,
you have to have like love affective filter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you can't have any blocks.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and I also like Crashin when he was. Is that his name? Crashin?
Yeah.
I'm
crashing.
crashing.
I was
When he was talking about it's like he wanted to learn Spanish, he couldn't just go and like plop himself in the middle of Mexico and then just like all of a sudden acquire this language. He can't just do acquisition.
You have to have a base.
That's the
You have to, and that's where he says where that balance between everyone has that learning and the acquisition part of it, where you have to have maybe a couple of classes in Spanish first to get that basis, and then go into
to Mexico.
like go to Mexico, go and fully immerse yourself in it, because you can't just go. You're gonna have no idea what anyone is saying, or you're not gonna
If you
understand.
don't have any sense of what
Yeah.
words
You have to
correlate
have
or
that
whatever.
in first in order to
Apply.
Yeah. When I went to Costa Rica, I had taken 2 years of Spanish before I went there. And having that 2 years, I could understand, like, when I went to, like, the market, for instance, I'm like, okay, I know what this is, I know what this is, I know what they're talking about here. And you could kind of have conversations with people. But if you had, no one ever calls me. Make sure it's, like, not an emergency.
It's kind of like, how you can't just give like one thing like that and then expect like the student to necessarily like to be able to take the learning as that is. The student has to be able to know what they're getting into and to be able to understand for how the learning to take place. And as I said, there's a ladder. There's a ladder of learning that takes place.
And I think that's interesting in like, okay, so what then do we expect from our students? Do we expect that they're building these foundation pieces, or do we expect them to be proficient? And like, when we're talking about like a lot of that proficiency comes from after you've built this foundation, then you go out into that language
I don't think
and build it. And so
I don't think you can expect them to necessarily be able to get it like right away.
No.
You know what I mean? I think it's something that's like maybe they'll get it in time, and if they do, that's great. But you can't just be like forcing the kid to be able to get something. Because
Depends on the student too.
Because that's a big thing that we're gonna be able to understand as teachers. That you can't just necessarily force it in the kid. Like we're gonna find these ways to kind of make things more approachable in a learning manner. And that's that.
I think that also like brings it back to like finding the motivation for the students to learn, and that's relating the curriculum to them, like them seeing themselves in the curriculum.
Well, also I kind of read it. Like everyone wants to communicate with people. So like that's sort of like a main motivation is like so you're able to talk to other people is like why people want to learn language. So you can communicate.
Yeah.
So I think that plays a big role in learning second languages.
I think so too. I like that, how you put that. All people want to communicate with others, so that's the motivation for learning the language, and that puts the emphasis on language as a communication, not as a grade, and that it has a different purpose there when you think about it.
Well, it's like that triangle too, the triangle of needs or whatever. And one of the needs that's like one of your basic human needs that you feel is like the sense of belonging. Like you want to have this feeling like you belong. And so communication is a huge part of that. I think. It'd be hard to feel like you belong if you cannot communicate.
Oh, sorry, no, I didn't pick up on that. Sorry.
No, I was done already.
No, sorry, you're good.
Oh no, I was literally done.
Okay. Well, I was gonna say, so for learning acquisition to take place, you can review over a relaxed environment. A relaxed environment is one thing that a teacher would prefer. And again, in our first year, it's not necessarily that like that's
that's going to be getting right away. And it's like, you know, as a teacher, like I can do my best to be able to try to understand, but that doesn't necessarily mean that like the learning will take place. And this kind of goes back to, because we've gone through Chomsky, we've gone through Piaget, we've you know we've gone through Spanish, second language. Yeah. So if there's anything else about this, there were certain questions that were mentioned, such as developmental psychology. So went over that already. That's pretty much like the point of where psychology is more developmental and goes through time, and that's I think that's an important thing to be able to understand. And sometimes there can even be like interruption that take place. And I'm like, huh, well, it's like, well, I didn't understand like that, but it's like that's okay. So for interruptions of class time, again, breaks for something that's going to be physically that could be helpful in the classroom. Standing up for a sec and being able to whatever jumping jacks. There's that video that we watched last week, discussed on the SIOD, of where kids were doing like 1 hop this time. 2 hops this time.
What's that called?
To the left.
Cha-cha slide.
Like have dances and stuff.
Cha-cha this move.
Middle school memories.
Cool.
Well, we're at 40.
Do you need to get going?
I have practice.
Okay. Mariah has practice.
Sorry.
All right, good for me to turn off.
Cool.
Yeah.
Do we have our questions?
We have one.
I think we only need one.
Yeah.
And I think
I just think that
See you next
language
week, Joy Wiggins.
Oh yeah.